we go. All right. So really, kind of one of the places we left off was we started to sculpt, right? Because one of the things you notice sometimes is some forms aren't easy to box model in, right? Getting like a horn, getting kind of a major ear appendage out, legs, toes, even the radial patterns of the eyes and mouths. Box modeling that stuff is usually pretty easy, right? It's some of the other weird dynamics you might want, some of the other weird edge loops and edge loop forms that can sometimes be a bit trickier. So that's one of the things we did is we really focused on initially just building a good box model version of this. But we didn't worry about every form, right? We were just kind of saying, hey, I'm going to get everything I know I can box model easily in. And then the stuff that might be a little bit weirder, like this flow through here into the nose and around, that's a little bit trickier to box model. And so we decided, let's just sculpt that, right? Let's just sculpt that because we can always do the retopologies for later, right? Of course, some of the other things we can do is sculpting. And remember, sculpting is multi-resolution, right? So you'll see that one of the things is it's a modifier, right? So you go to Add Modifier, Multi-Resolution. You'll notice that I have already applied my other modifiers, right? So the mirror modifier, the subdivision surface modifier applied. In fact, if I hit 3 to go back to face mode, you'll see that there is the denser low res now, right? The second apply modifier. And you'll notice that you could still go back to your normal modeling stuff. And in fact, things like your symmetry, because remember when you're in sculpting mode, so we're in the sculpting viewport here, when you hit 5 to go to sculpting, right, it'll bring all that stuff back up. You have a symmetry up here, right? And of course, you can have it on here as well. And even though you can't do normal modeling with this symmetry, so I can't extrude, I can't loop cut, you can shape. You can use slide, you could tweak, you could move stuff, right? So you see I could just, with my tweak tool, right, I could easily just pull that out. And you see how it pulls it out on the other side. I could select the face loop and move it. So you can actually still do normal modeling at the core level, right? Just by going back to, say, 1, 2, or 3. The moment you hit 4, it goes back to the multi-resolution version. Or 5, because remember, 5 is your quick key for Sculpt Mode, and that brings up your sculpting tools here, right? You don't even have to be in the sculpting menu to use this. If you want to stay in modeling, you can, right? So Sculpt Mode will come on with the sculpting tools regardless of which of the workspaces you're in, right? It's just that sculpting kind of automatically turns that stuff on. So we did apply our mirror and subdivision surface modifiers, and then we applied a multi-resolution modifier, right? And the cool thing about this is you'll see that you can get rid of it. If you find you don't like the sculpting, you can always just click on the X to delete the modifier, right? And then if you just want to add it again, you can. I'm going to undo because I did like the modifications I had on there. So that's how you get your modifier up, right? And then, of course, 5 for your sculpting tools. Just like 1, 2, 3 are vertex, edge, face. 4 is object. 5 is sculpt. And because we barely touched on this last time, so that's why I want to spend some more time today and even tomorrow talking about it. Once multi-resolution modifier is applied, you want to subdivide, right? You see there's an area called subdivision. You want to subdivide. That adds more geometry. See, we're actually at 73,000 polygons now. I subdivided twice. Now, the cool thing is page up and page down when you're in sculpt mode go down and up your resolution. So you can go up and down your resolutions. And you can work at any resolution. So if I go down to level 1, right, page down, I can easily go in here and say, hey, I'm going to kind of pull out this a little bit more. Because see, I've got the default sculpt tool on, right, draw. And you see I've got the strength down low. And by default, it's at the plus, which means it's going to pull out. So you see I can kind of enhance that area a bit more if I wanted to. But I'm doing it at a level 1. If I hit page up, see it goes up to level 2 again, and you'll see that that form is there. So just like Mudblocks, because a lot of you guys have experience with that, but if you ever eventually use ZBrush, it'll be like that there as well, just a slightly different interface for doing it. What multi-resolution offers, and any package that truly does high-resolution sculpting is doing this. Moda does it. Mudbox's sculpting does it. ZBrush. They're all basically working this way. They're giving you the ability to non-destructively work at the different resolutions. So these resolutions that we're working at, right, the further subdivides are generally non-destructive of each other. So you can work at higher levels, and it'll do its best to transfer to the lower level. and vice versa. If you're working at a lower level, it'll transfer up there. They're fairly non-destructive. That means you do stuff at a lower level, and it won't really screw up the stuff at the higher level, and vice versa. It's not 100%, but it's reasonably non-destructive. So it's cool. You can kind of go up and down your levels and work at the different levels of resolution. And that gives us a lot of options, right? Like I can go page down, go back to level 1. And I can just pull out a little bit more of this horn form here, right? So I can easily just kind of left-click, drag to sculpt that out, right? And see if we can get this ridge for the horn in here, right? There we go. And now we've got the ridge in there. Now, if I hit page down one more time, you see how it goes to level 0? There's actually a cool feature, though, in Blender's multi-resolution. You don't have to use it now. You can use it later. But you'll see right below subdivision is something called shape. Open this up. And you'll see there's something called apply to base, which your base is level 0. So watch what happens when I hit apply base. All of the shaping I did at the higher levels now transfers as best it can to level 0. So any sculpting you do up there, particularly if you do, like, particularly for that and that, you know, like this, we're going to have to retopo anyways, right? So that's not going to matter as much. But this we're honestly probably not going to retopo, and that we're honestly not going to retopo. They already follow the contour of the edges we have, right? So apply to base is cool, right? So if I undo, you see how kind of that's what your level 0 looks like, whereas our higher sculpts kind of have that form there. So if you open up this little section called shape in your multi-resolution modifier, there is something called apply base. What that does is it actually applies whatever shaping you did at level 1 or above to level 0. And that's neat. That's very, very cool. It allows any changes you do to the primary silhouette that you do want to keep as shape there. So I'm going to hit page up again to kind of go up a little higher, page 2. So page up and page down when you're in sculpt mode. When you have 5 on for sculpt mode, will go up and down your resolutions that you've currently applied, right? It won't go to level 3 because we haven't done a subdivide for level 3. So this makes it pretty easy for us to come in and say, hey, I can kind of do a little more sculpting to kind of give maybe a little bit of a fatty ridge there, right? Now remember, shift is your smooth. Now one of the things you'll notice, if I go back to my sculpting brushes right here, remember the very top of your properties menu is that wrench and screwdriver. That's basically your tool properties, your active tool settings, right? I mean, actually, it's a little more than that, but it is that too, right? You have some of the workspace stuff as well, but honestly, you're usually going to go in here for your tool properties. So you see here's your sculpting tool. You will notice that for strength, this is off, right? Use unified strength. If you have that on, what will happen is it'll keep the strength that you have for one brush for all of them. That's actually kind of neat. I myself don't like it, but it's cool that it's there. You just might want to turn it off. That way, say if I go down to the smooth tool here, right? So there's this kind of orange shish brush called smooth. You see when I click on that, you see how its strength is different than our draw? It's at 7, right? 0.7. It's a little high. So I'm going to bring that down a lot lower because I like my smooth subtle. So you can go in to smooth here, turn that strength down, and go back up to draw. And then you'll see, of course, left click drag to sculpt. If I want, remember, hold down control inverses, right? Control turns this to minus, right? So minus pushes in, plus kind of pulls out. But control is the quick key for that inverse. Shift is your smooth. And you see how it's a much more subtle smooth now? What that does is that kind of softens the shape. It's trying to push the polygons and vertices underneath the brush to kind of an average shape. It basically tries its hardest to get rid of the shaping you've done and smooth the mesh out, right? So it's like when you wrinkle up a piece of paper and then you try to kind of flatten that piece of paper back out again. The smooth brush is trying to flatten that piece of paper back out again. But it's great because certain parts get lumpy or you want the transition from areas to be a little smoother. So the biggest things for sculpting are going to be things like left mouse button to just kind of pull out some form, control to push in some form, right? So we can kind of define a little bit of form there. So just left mouse button with your draw is just going to pull out. Control push in. And then shift will allow you to soften. Remember, though, you might want to go down to your smooth brush and turn down its actual strength. And make sure to be kind of in the wrench screwdriver to turn off unified strength so that you can get independent ones. But see when I hold down Shift to smooth, see how it softens those areas out? And it just makes the sculpts more natural, right? Rarely are things super lumpy, and they kind of trend to what we call transitions from one mass of muscle to another mass of muscle, right? Those tend to blend into each other and kind of insert and fade under each other. So we like to smooth out those transitions. And you see this could be a really cool way to kind of define a little bit of extra form here. Now, of course, one of the things we could do is, like we said, we might want to do a bit more retopologizing in areas. So I feel like maybe a little bit of this back ridge could kind of be cool to do stuff too. So I'm going to hold down Control, because I don't want to just retopo this brow ridge. I want to retopo a little bit more. So what we could do is we can kind of bring in, say, kind of maybe this form right here. So I'm just holding down Control, right? It's still just the draw brush. I'm holding down Control to push in. And then, of course, I can hold down Shift to kind of smooth it and blend it better. But you'll notice we're kind of pushing that through there. Now I'm going to Shift to smooth that out a little bit there as well. Maybe a little bit of left click just to kind of bring that out a little bit. And now we've kind of created this really kind of interesting bony ridge. I'll even transition it maybe into the jawline there. Shift to smooth, right? So remember, left mouse button drag just sculpts. Control left mouse button will push in. Shift left mouse button will smooth or soften. And see how we have that kind of neat ridge that's kind of transitioning into there? If I hit 3 for face mode, you see how there's no edge loop for that? There's no edge loop that's creating that contour. Just like there's no proper edge loop creating this contour. That's bad. Right now, this section of the model and this section of the model, edge loop-wise, are not good, right? So, 5 again. So this is the idea that I want to explore with you guys. We're not going to go crazy with it, right? I'll like I said, maybe do something a little bit in the face, maybe like kind of there. Most of the rest you don't have to worry about. What we're going to do is we're eventually going to use retopologizing, where we're going to rebuild part of the mesh to build an edge loop that actually follows this contour of muscle, that actually follows this and bends around, right? If you're trying to make a well edge loop efficient model, the edge loops need to follow the bone and muscle contours. In this case, it's kind of more of a rhino, so we're probably doing more with bony ridges, right? Shells, kind of armored areas a little bit. But the idea is to do a little bit for the stuff that maybe you don't want to box model, that's harder to box model, and sculpt. So this is kind of one of those things that I really want to explore with you guys today. One, a little bit more of the tools, right? The fact that Control inverses, the fact that smooth is down here and you can hold down Shift to smooth, to soften. The fact that you can turn off unified strength and set these values differently. If you have a Wacom brush at home, a Wacom pen and tablet, this will actually take into consideration strength pressure. The nice thing is you can turn that off and on. So when you spend more and more time with sculpting tools in Blender, they're actually quite excellent. They're quite good. Not perfect, mind you, but quite good. And we're here, we're not even using them for doing heavy detailing, right? We're just using them to kind of shape some form, right? And to do a little bit of primary shaping, right? I'm not doing wrinkles or scales yet, or scratches or carves in the bone, right? So we're not doing that stuff yet. We're still focusing on just enhancing some of the primary shape and doing some of the primary shape that maybe we can't box model. Now remember, you can go back to the blue wrench for your multi-resolution modifier. I'll hit page down just to go down there. And remember, watch what happens when I apply base. So it actually kind of applied some of that shaping we did there. Now those areas, generally speaking, see how even that area is kind of a little bit off? So I might do a smidge retopo there as well. Just like, see how that's just not really pulling that well? It's just not good edge loops there, or there, or there to follow the kind of primary form we were doing. So that's the idea, is kind of I wanted to get a little bit of sculpting in there. But you see how that still can apply some cool shape changes? So multi-resolution modifier in Blender, quite cool, quite powerful. And now you can see what we've done is we've taken a sculpt pass for primary forms on this, right? The nice thing is we don't have to rely on automated retopologizing, which I find are generally hit or miss. It's not terribly reliable on any software I've ever used. So I love to box model as much as I can because I know that's really fast and easy, particularly in Blender, which is great at that. And I know I'm going to have most of the edge loops I want. And then what I do is I say, okay, I've done what I can with box modeling. Let's take a sculpt pass for the weirder shapes, right? The shapes that are not going to be as easy to box model, where I'm going to find it easier to just sculpt them in a bit and then retopple just those sections manually. And that's what we're going to be seeing coming up later this week, right? We're definitely going to be starting to explore retopologizing on Thursday. Tomorrow we'll do a little more review on stuff, just so we've got some more of that practice with sculpting, applying multi-resolution. I think that'll be a great place to stop for today, though. Got us some good further sculpting, showing you some of the neat features that this has. And we're going to be seeing multi-resolution a lot more this term, right? We're going to be using it to do the heavy detailing. So eventually, once we've got a good base mesh for this and we've UV unwrapped it, we'll eventually put some armor on this. We still got a couple weeks more of modeling this. We'll UV unwrap it, and then we'll take it in for heavy sculpting, right? Sculpting at millions of polygons that we could then bake into some normal maps. And then we could eventually paint color on it, light and render it. Because we do have till late May, right? So we got a lot of time left to work on this project. All right, so I'm going to stop that. And yeah, all right.